The universe had rules. Everyone knew them. Every species that traveled between the stars understood that some worlds were too dangerous to touch. Earth was one of those worlds. The Galactic Concord had existed for 6,000 years. 412 species had joined together in peace. They traded with each other. They shared knowledge. They helped each other grow. But they all agreed on one thing. Some planets should never be contacted. Some creatures should never be given the chance to reach the stars. Earth sat in a small corner of the galaxy. Spinning around a yellow sun that the aliens called Sal 3, the planet looked beautiful from space. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. But the Concord scientists knew the truth. Earth was a death trap. The oxygen levels in the atmosphere were so high that a single spark could start a fire that burned for days. The planet had massive storms that could destroy cities. The ground shook and split open without warning. Mountains exploded with liquid rock. The water was filled with creatures that had hundreds of teeth and no mercy. And then there were the humans. The Concord had watched them for centuries. They watched the humans hunt animals 10 times their size. They watched them survive in frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They watched them fight wars against each other with weapons that could level mountains. The humans had split the atom before they had learned to stop killing each other. They were brilliant and terrifying and completely insane, so the Concord did what made sense. They drew a line around Earth and called it a quarantine zone. No contact. No communication. No trade. Let the Deathworlders stay on their death world. Let them never know what waited for them in the stars. For 200 years, the humans stayed quiet. The Concord almost forgot about them. That was their first mistake. Captain Elsie Murray was having the worst day of her life. She stood on the bridge of her science vessel, the whisper of dawn, and watched the star in front of her die. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Fly to the edge of the Orion Spur. Study the old star. Collect data. Go home. No one had predicted the star would collapse early. The gravity well had grabbed her ship like a fist. Her engines were not strong enough to break free. Her navigator, a young Valorian named Pell, had done the calculations 3 times. The numbers were always the same. They had 36 hours before the star crushed them into dust. Yelthi looked at her crew. There were 37 of them. Valorians were not built for danger. Their bodies were thin and delicate, with skin that glowed soft blue when they were calm and bright red when they were afraid. Right now, every person on the bridge was burning red dot. She had sent the distress signal an hour ago, the universal beacon. The frequency that every Concord species monitored. Someone would come. Someone had to come. Her communications officer looked up from his console. His name was Thresh, and he was the oldest member of the crew. His glow had faded to a tired gray. "Captain," he said, "I have received responses to our signal." Yelthi felt hope spark in her chest. "How long until rescue arrives?" Thresh was quiet for a moment. "The nearest Concord vessel is 90 hours away." The hope died. Yelthi closed her eyes. 90 hours. They had 36. The math was simple. The math was death. "Send our final songs," she said. Her voice was steady even though her heart was breaking. "Let our families know we loved them." The crew began to sing. Valorians did not cry. They sang. Their voices rose and fell in patterns of light and sound, each note carrying a lifetime of memories. Yelthi joined them. She thought about her daughter waiting at home. She thought about the grandchildren she would never meet. They sang for 3 hours. Then Pell screamed. "Ships!" he shouted. Ships dropping out of hyperspace. Yelthi spun toward the view screen. Her heart stopped beating. 17 vessels had appeared from nowhere. They were huge. They were covered in weapons. They were built like nothing she had ever seen before. Their hulls were thick and heavy, designed to survive impacts that would shatter any Concord ship. Their engines burned so hot that they left trails of fire in the void. "Those are not Concord ships," Thresh whispered. A transmission came through. The voice was strange. Hard sounds and sharp edges. The universal translator struggled to keep up. "Valorian vessel, This is Admiral Constance Eulerin of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We intercepted your distress call. Prepare for emergency tow. We are getting you out of here. Earth, the word hit Yelthy like a physical blow. Earth, the quarantine world, the death world, the place where monsters lived, Captain Pell said. His voice was shaking. I am scanning their ships. The creatures inside them, they breathe oxygen. Their body temperature is 37 degrees. They have internal skeletons made of calcium so dense it could stop a blade. They are. He did not finish. He did not need to. Everyone on the bridge knew what humans were. Yelthy should have refused. She should have told them to stay away. The Concord laws were clear. No contact with quarantined species, no exceptions. But the star was dying. Her crew was dying, and 17 ships full of monsters had come to save them. This is Captain Yelthy Murray, she said. We accept your assistance. The humans moved fast. 3 of their ships broke away from the pot formation and flew toward the Whisper of Dawn. Beams of energy reached out and grabbed her vessel. Tractor beams. Powerful ones. More powerful than anything the Concorde had ever built. The star groaned behind them. It was starting to collapse. The gravity was getting stronger. The Whisper of Dawn shook and screamed as the metal bent under the pressure. Admiral Eulerin's voice came through again. This time it was softer, almost gentle. Hold on. This is going to get rough. The human ships fired their engines. The force was incredible. Yelthy was thrown against her chair. She heard her crew crying out. The ship twisted and shook. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The view screen showed the star behind them, folding in on itself, becoming smaller and brighter and more deadly with every second. Then the humans did something impossible. They jumped to hyperspace. While still inside a gravity well, every Valorian scientist knew that was suicide. The math did not work. The physics did not allow it. Ships that tried to jump inside gravity wells were torn apart. But the human ships did not tear apart. They dragged the Whisper of Dawn with them into the swirling colors of hyperspace. The star disappeared. The gravity released them. They were alive. Yelthy sat in her chair and tried to breathe. Her crew was silent. The red glow of fear slowly faded from their skin, replaced by something she had never seen before. A soft golden color. The color of shock. The color of wonder. The monsters from the quarantine zone had just saved their lives. 6 minutes later, the star exploded. If the humans had been even a little slower, the Whisper of Dawn would have been destroyed. 37 Valorians would have died in fire and gravity and darkness. Instead, they were floating safely in hyperspace, surrounded by ships full of creatures that should have terrified them. Yelthy looked at the view screen. She could see one of the human vessels through the strange light of hyperspace. It was ugly and brutal and built for war. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Captain Thresh said quietly. What do we do now? Yelthy did not have an answer. The Concorde had rules about this, laws, procedures. But the Concorde had not come to save them. The humans had. We say thank you, she said finally. And we hope they understand. The Whisper of Dawn drifted in normal space again. The human ships had brought them to a quiet place far from the dead star, far from danger. Yelthy stood on her bridge and stared at the massive vessel floating beside them. The humans called it the Iron Promise. It was 3 times larger than her ship. Its hull was covered in scars from old battles. This was a ship that had seen war. Admiral Eulerin requested permission to come aboard. Yelthy's crew was terrified. Pell had spent the last hour reading everything the Concorde knew about humans. The information was not comforting. Humans could run for hours without stopping. They healed from wounds that would kill other species. They ate the flesh of other creatures. They kept animals as pets and servants. They had fought 2 world wars in a single century. They had survived plagues and ice ages and extinction events, and now one of them wanted to walk onto her ship, Captain Thresh said. Concorde law forbids direct contact with quarantined species. Concorde law also forbids letting your crew die when help is offered, Yelthy replied. She was surprised by the anger in her own voice. We would be dead right now. All of us. The Concorde was 90 hours away. These humans came in 12. I will not insult them by refusing to meet them. She told the humans yes. 20 minutes later, a small shuttle detached from the Iron Promise and flew toward the Whisper of Dawn, Yelthi. Waited at the airlock with Pell and Thresh. Her skin was glowing and nervous orange. She could not make it stop. The airlock opened. Hot air rushed in. The temperature was almost painful. Valorians preferred cold environments. Humans, apparently, did not. Admiral Constance Eulerin stepped through the door. She was shorter than Yelthi had expected. Humans were supposed to be tall and terrifying. This one barely reached Yelthi's shoulder. Her skin was dark brown, and her hair was cut close to her head in tight curls. She wore a uniform of deep blue with gold markings on the shoulders. Her eyes were warm and steady. Behind her came two other humans. One was a young man with pale skin and black hair. The other was a woman with golden skin and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. They all moved with a strange grace. Predator grace. Hunter grace. Captain Murray, the Admiral said. She pressed her hand against her chest and bowed her head slightly. Thank you for allowing us aboard. I am Admiral Constance Eulerin. These are my officers, Lieutenant Chen and Commander Diallo. Yelthi tried to speak. Her throat was dry. She forced herself to respond. Admiral Eulerin, I must thank you for saving my crew. We were prepared to die. You gave us our lives back. The Admiral smiled. It was a strange expression. Humans showed their teeth when they were happy. Valorians showed their teeth when they were about to fight. Yelthi had to remind herself that this was friendliness, not aggression. No one should die alone in the dark, the Admiral said. Not if we can help it. The young man, Lieutenant Chen, was looking around the bridge with open curiosity. His eyes were bright and interested. He did not seem afraid of anything, even though he was surrounded by aliens he had never seen before. Your ship is beautiful, he said. The design is so elegant. Our ships are just big boxes with engines. Pell made a small noise of surprise. He had expected the humans to be cold and frightening. He had not expected them to give compliments. Yelthi led the humans to a meeting room. The chairs were designed for Valorian bodies, so the humans had to sit awkwardly on the edges. They did not complain. The Admiral folded her hands on the table and looked at Yelthi with calm attention. Captain Murray, I must be honest with you. We knew that responding to your signal would cause problems. The Concorde has laws about contact with Earth. We have been watching you for a long time. We know we are not welcome. Yelthi felt her skin flicker with confusion. You knew you would break the law. And you came anyway? Yes. Why? The Admiral was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. Because someone was dying. And we could help. Commander Diallo leaned forward. She had been silent until now, watching everything with sharp eyes. Her voice was deep and smooth. On Earth, we have something called the Law of the Sea. When a ship is in danger, every other ship must help. It does not matter who they are. It does not matter what flag they fly. You save them because they need saving. That is the only reason you need. Yelthi did not know what to say. She had studied humans in school. Every Valorian child learned about the Deathworlds and the creatures that lived on them. Humans were described as dangerous, violent, and unpredictable. No one had ever mentioned that they might also be kind. Lieutenant Chen reached into his bag and pulled out a small container. He placed it on the table and opened it. Inside were small, round objects that smelled sweet. These are cookies, he said. We brought them as a gift. They are safe for most carbon-based life forms. We checked your biological data before we came. Pell stared at the cookies. His scientific mind was struggling to process this information. The terrifying Deathworlders had brought them baked goods. Yelthi picked up one of the cookies. It was warm. She took a small bite. The taste was unlike anything she had experienced. Sweet and soft and somehow comforting. This is good, she said. Lieutenant Chen's face lit up with happiness. My grandmother's recipe. She would have been glad to know that aliens like her cookies, They talked for 3 hours. Yelthi learned things about humans that the Concord files had never mentioned. She learned that they laughed at danger because they had faced so much of it. She learned that they formed bonds with other creatures so strong that they would die to protect them. She learned that they created art and music and stories because they believed life should be more than just survival. She also learned that Lieutenant Chen had burns on his arms. When she asked about them, he shrugged like it was nothing important. Some of your crew were injured during the jump. The environmental suits were not ready yet. I carried them to the medical bay myself without protection. They needed help. The suits would have taken too long. Yelthi looked at his burned skin. The Valorian atmosphere was cold enough to damage human tissue. He had known that. He had helped anyway. You hurt yourself to save my people, she said. Chen looked embarrassed. It is just skin. It will heal. Your people would not have healed if I waited. Commander Diallo nodded. That is what we do. We break ourselves so that others do not have to break. When the meeting ended, Yelthi walked the humans back to their shuttle. The Admiral stopped at the airlock and turned to face her. Captain Murray, the Concord will ask you questions about us. They will want to know if we are a threat. They will want to know if they should be afraid. What should I tell them? The Admiral smiled again. This time Yelthi did not flinch at the teeth. Tell them the truth. We are exactly what they feared. We are survivors of a world that tried to kill us every day. We are strong and fast and hard to break. But tell them this also. We did not come to your rescue because we wanted something from you. We came because you were in pain and we could make it stop. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done. She stepped into the shuttle. The door closed. A few minutes later, the small vessel flew back to the Iron Promise. Yelthi stood at the airlock for a long time. Her skin was glowing a color she had never seen before. Something between gold and silver. The color of hope mixed with wonder. The monsters were not what she had expected. They were so much more. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. A quarantined species had made contact. Not through war. Not through invasion. Through rescue. The Concord had never seen anything like it. Captain Yelthi Murray became famous overnight. Every news service in 400 systems wanted to interview her. Every scientist wanted to study the data from her ship. Every government wanted to know the truth about the Deathworlders from Earth. The Concord Council called an emergency meeting on the capital station, a massive structure that floated in the heart of civilized space. Representatives from all 412 member species gathered in the Great Chamber. The room was enormous, built to hold thousands of delegates. Floating platforms carried each species to their assigned positions. The air hummed with translator devices working in hundreds of languages. Yelthi stood at the center of the chamber, feeling very small. High Chancellor Morvax. A massive creature covered in armored plates called the Session to Order. His voice boomed through the hall like thunder. We are here to discuss the incident in the Orion Spur. Captain Yelthi Murray of Valoria has agreed to give testimony. She will describe her encounter with the quarantined species known as humans. The chamber went silent. Every eye, sensor, and antenna turned toward Yelthi. She told them everything. She described the dying star and the failed escape. She described the human ships arriving like ghosts from nowhere. She described Admiral Oileron and her crew, their strange warmth, their impossible bravery. She described Lieutenant Chen burning his own skin to save Valorian lives. When she finished, the chamber erupted into chaos. Ambassador Rethke of the Morvali Dominion rose from his platform. The Morvali were an old species, known for their wisdom and their sharp tongues. Rethke's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The question before us is simple. What do we do when we realize the monsters are more merciful than we are? The chamber fell silent again. Ambassador Thresh of the Valorian delegation spoke next. He was Yelthi's former communications officer, now elevated to represent his homeworld. The humans violated the quarantine. That is true. But they violated it to save lives. 37 Valorian citizens would be dead without their intervention. The Concord's own ships were too far away. We failed our people. The humans did not. A delegate from the Crix Collective rose on 6 legs. The Cricks were insectoid beings who communicated through clicking sounds. Their translator rendered the clicks into words. This is precisely why the quarantine exists. The humans are too capable, too fast, too strong. If they can rescue ships from collapsing stars, imagine what they could do in war. They are a threat to galactic stability. Yelthi felt anger rising in her chest. She had not been given permission to speak again, but she could not stay silent. I stood in a room with 3 humans for 3 hours. They brought us cookies. Cookies. They wanted to share food with us because they thought we might be hungry after our ordeal. Does that sound like a species preparing for war? The Crick's delegate clicked dismissively. A strategy. Kindness as a weapon. They are earning our trust before they strike, Yelthi said. They are simply kind. The debate continued for 6 hours. Some delegates wanted to punish Earth for breaking the quarantine. Some wanted to pretend the incident never happened. Some wanted to open diplomatic relations immediately. The arguments went in circles. Finally, High Chancellor Morvax called for silence. We have heard enough words. It is time for a decision. The Council will vote on the following proposal. The Galactic Concord will open formal diplomatic relations with the planet, Earth and its human inhabitants. The voting began. Each delegate registered their choice through their personal console. The numbers appeared on a massive screen at the front of the chamber. Yes, 387. No, 25. The chamber exploded into noise. Yelthi felt tears forming in her eyes. Valorians rarely cried, but this moment deserved tears. The quarantine was over. Humanity was coming to the stars. 3 months later, Earth sent its first official ambassador to the Concord capital. Her name was Constance Eulerin. The admiral had traded her military uniform for diplomatic robes, but her eyes were the same, calm, steady, unafraid. Yelthi was there to greet her. They had stayed in contact since the rescue, exchanging messages across the light years. A strange friendship had grown between them. The Valorian captain and the human admiral. 2 people who should never have met, now bound together by fate. Welcome to the Concord, Yelthi said. I hope you are ready for politics. It is almost as dangerous as dying stars, Eulerin laughed. It was a warm sound, full of genuine happiness. I have commanded warships in hostile space. I think I can handle a few angry delegates. The diplomatic process was complicated. Many species were still afraid of humans. The old stories were hard to forget. Deathworlders, monsters, predators who killed for sport. But slowly, things began to change. Human scientists shared their research on surviving hostile environments. Human engineers helped design better emergency rescue systems. Human doctors offered new treatments for injuries and diseases that other species had given up on. And the stories began to change too. Traders who visited Earth returned with tales of bustling cities and beautiful art. Scientists who studied human history found stories of courage and sacrifice alongside the wars and violence. Musicians discovered human songs that made them cry in languages they had never heard. The humans were not what anyone had expected. They were loud and emotional and sometimes reckless. They formed attachments to other creatures that seemed almost unhealthy. They kept pets. They named their ships and talked to them like friends. They celebrated holidays for no practical reason except that celebration made them happy, but they were also loyal beyond measure. When a human called you a friend, they meant it with their entire being. They would cross the galaxy to help someone they cared about. They would die for strangers if those strangers needed protection. Ambassador Rethke, who had asked the famous question on the day of the vote, became one of humanity's strongest supporters. He told anyone who would listen that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake by isolating Earth for so long. We were afraid of their strength, he said. We should have been grateful for their hearts. Yelthi watched all of this happen from her new position as the Concord's liaison to Earth. She visited the human homeworld several times. Each visit changed her understanding of these strange, wonderful creatures. She saw children playing in parks, laughing without fear. She saw old people sitting together, telling stories of lives well lived. She saw artists creating beauty from nothing but paint and imagination. She saw soldiers standing guard, not to conquer, but to protect, and she saw the scars. Earth was not a gentle world. The evidence was everywhere. Cities built in places that flooded or shook or burned. Monuments to wars that had killed millions. Museums dedicated to plagues and disasters and near-extinction events. The humans had survived all of it. They had survived things that would have destroyed any other species, and they had emerged not bitter, but hopeful. How do you do it? Yalthi asked Oilerin one day. They were sitting in a garden on Earth, surrounded by flowers that the humans had somehow made grow in hostile soil. How do you face so much pain and still believe in kindness? Oilerin was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because kindness is how we survived. We are not strong because we fought alone. We are strong because we learned to fight together. Every human you meet carries the love of everyone who came before them. Our ancestors taught us that life is hard, but life is worth living. And the best way to honor that lesson is to help. Others live too. Yalthi felt the strange golden glow spreading across her skin again. Hope, wonder, gratitude. The monsters from the Deathworld were teaching her what it meant to be alive. The Keth marauders had been a plague on the outer systems for centuries. They came from a dead world on the edge of known space, a species that had chosen raiding over building. They attacked colonies that were too weak to defend themselves. They took prisoners and sold them as slaves. They burned what they could not carry. The Concord had fought them for generations, but the Keth were clever. They struck fast and disappeared into the void before help could arrive. The outer colonies lived in constant fear. Many had stopped asking the Concord for protection. The Concord never came in time. Valaxis Prime was one of those colonies. The planet was home to 300,000 people from a dozen different species. They had built a good life there, farming the fertile soil and trading with passing ships. They were peaceful. They were undefended. They were exactly the kind of target the Keth loved. The marauders arrived with 30 ships. They blocked all escape routes. They demanded surrender. When the colony refused, the Keth began their siege. They bombed the cities. They destroyed the farms. They waited for starvation and despair to break the colonists. The Concord received the distress call and calculated the response time. 60 hours for a proper fleet to assemble. The council debated. Some wanted to act immediately. Others argued that the outer colonies were too far away, too expensive to protect. The debate continued while Valaxis Prime burned. On the 4th day of the siege, a mother named Selith managed to reach an old communication array on the outskirts of her destroyed city. Her children huddled behind her, terrified and hungry. She did not know if anyone would hear her. She did not care about protocols or politics or proper channels. She broadcast on every frequency she could reach. Please, someone, anyone. My children are dying. The Keth are killing us. Please help, please. Her signal traveled across the light years. It reached 100 worlds. Most ignored it. What could they do? The Keth were too strong. The distance was too great, but the signal also reached Earth. Admiral Chen Wei sat in his command center on Mars when the message arrived. He was the son of Marcus Chin, the lieutenant who had burned himself saving Valorians 8 years ago. His father had taught him that distance was not an excuse. Difficulty was not an excuse. The only excuse was not trying. He mobilized the Deathworlder fleet in 6 hours. 12 ships. 4,000 soldiers. The finest warriors humanity had ever produced. The journey to Valaxis Prime should have taken 40 hours. The human ships made it in 20-2. The Keth were not prepared. They had heard stories about humans, of course. Everyone had. But stories were just stories. The Keth had been fighting weak species for centuries. They did not believe that any creature could be as dangerous as the legends claimed. They learned their mistake quickly. The human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They did not hesitate. They did not negotiate. They opened fire before the Keth could even raise their shields. 3 marauder vessels exploded in the first 30 seconds. Warlord Kraxus, the leader of the Keth fleet, screamed orders at his crew. Retreat, regroup, fight back. But the humans were everywhere at once, moving with a speed and precision that the Keth had never seen. Their ships twisted through space like living things. Their weapons hit targets that should have been impossible to track. The battle lasted for hours. In that time, the humans destroyed 23 Keth ships. They captured 6 more. They killed over 2,000. Marauders without losing a single vessel of their own. But the real horror came when the humans boarded the Keth command ship. Warlord Craxus had sealed himself. In the central chamber with his elite guards, he had 100 warriors with him, all armed with the best weapons his rating had bought. He was confident. No species had ever breached a Keth command ship. The corridors were filled with toxic gas that killed oxygen breathers. The gravity was set to crushing levels. The lights were designed to blind sensitive eyes. The humans did not seem to notice. They cut through the outer doors with plasma torches. They walked through the poison gas wearing suits that barely covered their skin. They moved in the heavy gravity like it was nothing unusual. The Keth guards opened fire. The humans kept coming. Lieutenant Commander Amara Diallo led the assault team. She was the daughter of the commander who had spoken about the law of the sea all those years ago. She had grown up hearing stories about what humans could do. Now, she was proving those stories true. Her team reached the central chamber in 30 minutes. They killed 60 Keth guards along the way. They did not stop to rest. They did not slow down. They moved like machines built for a single purpose. Warlord Craxus saw them coming. He ran. He made it to his escape pod. He launched into space, trying to reach the edge of the system where his last ships were hiding. He almost made it. Amara Diallo followed him. She left the ship through an emergency airlock. She did not have a vehicle. She only had her suit and a magnetic charge she had been carrying for just this moment. The suit was not designed for deep space. It would protect her for maybe 2 minutes before her blood began to boil. She flew through the void using small gas jets built into her armor. She caught up with the escape pod in 47 seconds. She planted the charge on the hull. She pushed away just as it exploded. The escape pod cracked open. Warlord Craxus tumbled into space. Dying in the cold and the silence, Amara floated there for another 30 seconds before her people reached her. Her suit was failing. Ice had formed on her skin. Her vision was going dark, but she was smiling. The rescue ship pulled her inside. The medics rushed to save her. They did save her, barely. She spent 6 weeks recovering from the damage. When she woke up, she found a message from the colonists of Velox's Prime waiting for her. You came for us. You heard our cry, and you came. We do not know how to thank you. We do not know if thanks is enough. But we want you to know that as long as Velox's Prime stands, we will remember what Earth did for us. We will remember that when everyone else looked away, the humans looked toward the fire and ran. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy. The Concord Council debated again. Some were worried. The humans had shown what they could do in combat. They had proven that the old fears were justified. They really were Deathworlders. They really were monsters. But other voices rose above the fear. Ambassador Thresh. Now the senior Valorian representative addressed the council with passion in his voice. Yes, the humans are dangerous. Yes, they are capable of violence that makes our soldiers look like children. But look at how they used that violence. They saved 300,000 innocent lives. They stopped a siege that we could not stop. They ran into the fire because a mother asked for help. He paused, his skin glowing with fierce conviction. If these are monsters, then perhaps we need more monsters. Perhaps we have been so focused on safety that we forgot what courage looks like. The Keth marauders never attacked another colony. Those who survived the battle at Velox's Prime were captured and sent to rehabilitation facilities. Their ships were destroyed. Their slave markets were closed, and across the outer systems, a new word began to spread. When trouble came, when help seemed impossible, people started saying it like a prayer. Call the Earthers. The cavalry had arrived, and they were not leaving. 5 years had passed since the Whisper of Dawn sent its desperate signal into the dark. 5 years since 17 human ships had appeared from nowhere to save 37 strangers. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Great Hall of the Concord. Council was filled with delegates from 413 species. The new number still felt strange to many of the older representatives. For 6,000 years, humanity had been a ghost story. A warning, a nightmare kept locked away behind quarantine lines. Now, they sat among the stars like they had always belonged there. The ceremony was simple but powerful. Earth was being formally inducted as a full member of the Galactic Concord. Ambassador Constance Eulerin stood at the center of the chamber, wearing the blue and gold robes that had become her signature. Her hair had more gray in it now, but her eyes were the same. Calm, steady, unshakable, Captain Yelthy Murray sat in the Valorian delegation, her skin glowing a soft silver. She had been invited as a guest of honor. Without her, none of this would have happened. She had been the first to trust the monsters. She had been the first to see them as they truly were. High Chancellor Morvax called the assembly to order. His voice echoed through the vast space. We are gathered to welcome a new member into our family of stars. The planet Earth and its human inhabitants have proven themselves worthy of this honor through actions, not words. They have shown courage in the face of impossible odds. They have shown mercy when they could have shown strength. They have shown us that sometimes the things we fear the most are the things we need the most. He turned to face Eulerin. Ambassador, you may address the council. Eulerin stepped forward. She looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of as many delegates as she could. Some still looked afraid. Some looked hopeful. Most looked curious. They had heard so many stories about humans. Now they wanted to hear the truth from a human's own mouth. She began to speak. We heard your signal. We know it was not meant for us. We know you feared us. Perhaps some of you still do. But we did not come because you called. We came because someone was suffering, and we had the power to help. Her voice was quiet but clear. It carried to every corner of the chamber without effort. On Earth, we have a saying. The measure of a species is how it treats those who can do nothing for them. You looked at our world and saw death. You saw predators with sharp teeth. You saw fire and poison and violence. You saw a planet that should have killed everything on it 1,000 times over, and you wondered how anything could survive there, how anything could thrive there, how anything could become civilized there. She paused. The silence was absolute. The answer is simple. We survived together. Every human alive today carries the blood of ancestors who chose cooperation over isolation, who chose to share food instead of hoarding it, who chose to protect strangers because those strangers might become friends. Our world tried to kill us every day. We did not defeat it by being harder or crueler or more ruthless. We defeated it by being kind to each other. She took a breath. Her hands were steady at her sides. That is why we came for the Whisper of Dawn. That is why we fought it, Galaxis Prime. That is why we will always answer when someone cries out in the dark. Because that is what Deathworlders do. We run toward the fire. We have been doing it for 100,000 years. It is who we are. In the Valorian section, Yelthy felt tears rolling down her face. Her bioluminescent patterns were shifting through colors she had never produced before. Joy, pride, love, gratitude, all mixed together into something that had no name. Eulerin continued. So here is our promise to you. Earth will never conquer. We have seen enough empires rise and fall to know that conquest brings nothing but pain. Earth will never enslave. We have fought too hard for our own freedom to ever take it from someone else. Earth will never betray the trust you place in us today. She raised her hand and pressed it against her chest. The gesture was old. It came from ancient Earth, from a time when warriors showed that they held no weapons. Now it meant something more. It meant honesty. It meant an open heart. But if you send a signal into the dark, any signal, from any world, for any reason, we will answer. It does not matter how far away you are. It does not matter how dangerous the situation is. It does not matter if helping you breaks every rule we have ever made. We will come. Because that is what protectors do. That is what we choose to be. She lowered her hand. We were never meant to hear your signal. But thank the stars we did. And thank the stars you gave us a chance to show you who we really are. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the applause began. It started with the Valorians. Yelthi rose to her feet, her skin blazing with light, her hands beating together in the human style of celebration. Other delegates followed. Then more, then hundreds. Then thousands. 413 species stood together, applauding the monsters who had become heroes. Oileran stood at the center of it all, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She had spent her whole life preparing for war. She had never expected to be welcomed with love. After the ceremony, Yelthi found her standing alone on an observation deck. The stars stretched out before them, endless and beautiful. Somewhere out there, the star that had almost killed the Whisper of Dawn had left behind a nebula of glowing gas. Death transformed into beauty. You gave a good speech, Yelthi said. Oileran smiled. I meant every word. I know. That is what made it good. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two friends from different worlds bound by a moment of desperate courage 5 years ago. What happens now? Yelthi asked. Oileran looked out at the stars. Her expression was thoughtful. Now we prove that we meant what we said. We help where we can. We protect those who need protection. We show the galaxy that humans are more than just survivors. We are builders. We are healers. We are friends. She turned to face Yelthi, and we remember. We remember that none of this would have happened if your ship had not sent that signal. We remember that the first step toward friendship is always the hardest. We remember that you gave us a chance when everyone else wanted to keep us locked away. Yelthi's skin glowed warm and golden. I was terrified when your ships appeared. I thought we were about to die in a different way. I thought the monsters had come to finish what the star had started, and now. Yelthi laughed. It was a bright sound, full of joy. Now I know the truth. You are not monsters. You never were. You are just people who grew up in a hard place and decided to be kind anyway. That is not monstrous. That is miraculous. Oileran reached out and took Yelthi's hand. Human and Valorian, standing together at the edge of forever. Then let us be miraculous together, she said. Let us show the galaxy what happens when the desperate and the deadly choose hope over fear. Out in the dark, somewhere beyond the edge of Concord space, another signal was being sent. Another ship in trouble. Another cry for help. The humans heard it first. They always did. And 12 hours later, when all hope seemed lost, 17 ships dropped out of hyperspace. The crews of those ships looked out at the chaos and the danger and the impossible odds. They smiled their predator smiles. They fired their engines. The cavalry had arrived, and they were not afraid.